Hello and welcome to the latest webinar from Cloud Assess. We hope you enjoy.
Velg Training would like to acknowledge that we are hosting this online event from the lands of the Turrbal people. We also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands on which you will work today, and the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people participating in this online event. We would also like to pay our respects to the elders both past and present and celebrate the diversity of Aboriginal peoples and their ongoing cultures and connections to the lands and waters of Australia.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Boosting Results, Minimising Risk, the Path to Better Learning Outcomes. Our presenter today is Alex Fuller. Alex is the dynamic Head of Customer Success at Cloud Assess and a seasoned vet with industry expert. With an MBA and over a decade of experience, Alex excels in implementing cutting-edge digital solutions for training and workplace skills providers, offering unparalleled insights into online assessment and training. Good morning, Alex. It's great to have you with us today.
Morning, Aaron. Thanks very much for the introduction. Looking forward to leading the session today.
You want to go ahead and share your screen? I'm just going to pop myself on mute.
Fantastic. Just a quick show of hands to make sure that we can see my screen. You can see that, Aaron. All good?
Yep, that's perfect.
Fantastic. Okay, we'll get straight into it. Firstly, thank you very much for joining us. Quite an interesting topic and lots to cover. So today's session, we've got a bit of an agenda to run through, and that's going to be understanding the learner challenges, the learner journey and an overview and a bit of a deep dive into the separate sort of stages that the learner works through, proven strategies, and we're going to share some experiences here for success and successful outcomes for our learner. We're going to review some LMS features that support better outcomes as well for learners. So really deep diving into the tech and what's out there and what's available. It's definitely something that's really close to my heart. The topic, something that really drives the motivation for what we want with our client base and across the industry, just always improving. Feel free to jump in, connect with me on LinkedIn as well. Always will get back to you if you drop me messages or have any questions, queries regards to the agenda and the topics that we're going to cover off today. It is going to be quite an interactive session, and I definitely want as much participation as we can in the polls and in the chat. There is a bit of a Q&A piece that I put together towards the end, and myself and my colleague Miles, who's going to jump in as well, will absolutely do our utmost to answer any questions and queries. If there's any takeaways, we'll happily get back to you. I also believe after the session that Erin and team from Velg will share a pack with all the links and all the information for you as well to review in your own time. So we'll jump straight in. And we'll start off with a bit of an icebreaker. So this is the first of a few polls and votes that we'll jump into. So we're going to use something called Slido. If you've not used it before, you can just grab your smartphone or device and scan the QR code, and it'll take you straight into this poll. You can also enter the poll by using slido.com and the unique number 7257327 that's shown on the screen there. And our first question, very open: how is everybody feeling about the finalized standards for 2025? So let's get a few of you in there. It's just a quick rating to get an idea of what the consensus is. So we've got straight away some people in there, which is great. Got a little bit neutral is the current sort of vote, yeah, we'll give you a moment or two just to all get in and have a bit of a play with that one and get your thoughts and feelings on those new or revised standards for 2025. Nothing new about them, but yeah, very neutral is still the flavor. Got a few that are Loving it and quite excited, I feel. In the chat there, yeah, no laughing response on this one. Yeah, some concerns around time to implement for sure. It can be a bit of a challenge. If you need a link, it's just Erin's just popped it in the chat for you there as well. Awesome. Thanks, Erin. Okay, so quite neutral is the current vote. 60% of us sort of indifferent to the challenges there, and we might have a bit of an opportunity to pick up some of that in the Q&A as well. I'm not going to let it totally sort of take over the agenda, but definitely good to get some insights to what the industry is feeling around those. Understanding the learner challenges. So this is where we start breaking down our agenda and jumping into those challenges. So what's really driving this? Why does it matter? So when we're talking about boosting results, firstly, we've got to get our learner all the way through that process. And here, some stats from NCVER, and there's a link in the pack that you're going to receive so you can have a review of these. Over half of enrolled students are failing to complete. So the completion rates for the latest information there, still a big challenge. Now, the main reasons, changing jobs, personal circumstances, some of those we can't affect. But the third item here, training does not meet expectations. Absolutely, I would suggest within our control. So really where our focus needs to be. And what are those key areas? There's some things definitely we can move the dial on here. If we dive in a bit more detail with the completion rates, 2023, so completion rates after 4 years, we can see slight improvement over the years, but still less than half completing. And we know across different areas of the sector that those stats are slightly skewed when you pull them all together, but still plenty of opportunity to really drive into what we can do to ensure that the training is the standard and meets the expectations of our market. When we look at understanding the learner challenges, there's some really good information that's available for you. Again, NCVER, there's a download here you can reference. And the student journey, this goes into a lot of detail, I suppose, but has a really nice summary and highlights at the front. And the detail shared in here shows the different sort of challenges that perhaps aren't necessarily obvious. I think it's a really useful document. They talk about many phases of completion and non-completion, really worth getting into. So before we take it further, we're going to start with our next Slido. And again, same process. If you just use a QR code or jump in there with slido.com and the unique code to join the poll, the biggest challenge, what is the biggest single challenge your learners face? So biggest challenge that your learners facing, we'll give you a minute or two with this one. And I think in context, this could be very different. There's certainly no rights and wrongs here with how we have assessed what we feel is our biggest challenge for our learner. So time poor, time management. Definitely a lot of competing priorities for a lot of our learners. Digital literacy is coming up. And when we're talking about the technology, there's a number of things around tech as well that are having an impact here. A language barrier is an interesting one. Again, potentially we could lean on tech to help support with those. Lack of understanding, confidence. Some great pieces being shared here. The work-life balance, the work-study balance is definitely a strong theme in time management coming up quite consistently. Yeah, there's definitely underlying pressures there for sure that compete with our learners' time. So getting into this, I suppose, without spending too much time on this, time management and all, I think there's a real question we need to ask ourselves here. How can we, without compromise, ensure that our learners can be really productive in their learning and also make that learning really available to them? So available around their time frames, available where suits them to consume learning. Obviously, there's restrictions and different delivery models, different requirements will drive unique challenges in that time management piece. And employer engagement is definitely key to being able to ring fence time as well. But efficiency would be a big sort of lever here if we can really challenge the efficiency piece and coach our learners in time management for sure. Awesome. Love it. Okay, breaking down the learner journey. So we've got 4 phases here that we're going to sort of pick and deep dive into. We've got the enrollment phase, we've got support and progression, training and assessment, and completion. Now, it's my belief that we're setting those expectations, we're aligning to the expectations of our customer right from the beginning. So there's no one phase of the learner journey that's more important than another, but there's a massive opportunity at the beginning to install good time management, to support with flexibility, to look at how we can address some of those really common challenges with great communication, great coaching from the get-go. So enrollment, I'm a real strong advocate for ensuring that we've got all the information and we've got it in a really concise, easy to consume sort of communication piece, but that it's extremely accessible and flexible as well wherever we can. So enrollment, very, very key. Support and progression, majority of our time is going to be sort of focused on that support, progression, training and assessment space. But getting to that completion, we have to be really clear what this progression looks like, what that journey looks like to an individual user as well, to that learner who's consuming. Now, to help me work through these individual sections of the learner journey, I'm going to introduce to you now one of my colleagues, Miles. Miles is joining us to help facilitate the webinar. Very experienced industry professional. Miles has not only delivered TAE, but worked in the setup of that qualification and many others across the vet sector over the last few decades. So welcome, Miles.
Nice to be here, and thank you for the introduction.
No problem. Miles also has a background in instructional design, and he's also delivered training in the non-accredited space, worked very closely with employers, and has some great insights around that management challenge as well. So moving in, Q&A, we're going to open it up. Let's jump into the chat. And in the chat here, what's important to get right with enrollment? So thinking about that enrollment phase, that early piece, I've shared some insights where I think that there's some definite opportunities for improvement. LLN jumped straight in there. LLN, we spoke about the language barriers, we spoke about the challenges there and addressing our training to that correct standard. Language is absolutely key, and you can unpack language a bit further to using language that's warm, approachable, easy to consume. So yeah, language is absolutely a key one. Learning needs, clarity of information of what we're sharing and how we're sort of visualizing this process. Communication pieces, love it. We're getting lots of interaction. This is fantastic. Addressing those foundation skills, yeah. Miles,
Sorry,
in your career there that's important at the enrollment
well,
phase?
just thinking about this question and looking at the comments coming through. When I think about this question, I say, what's important to get right with enrollment? It goes all the way back to the marketing of the course. And this also explains why the new standards have emphasized the compliance requirements around marketing so much. So quite often they came up in the chat before that the learners were not aware of what's needed of them. So the training doesn't meet the learner's expectations. So going all the way back to the marketing to align that properly with the rest of the course itself. So that's part of the enrollment process, is what information has been provided to the learner in order for them to now want to be part of this course. So that's really important to get right with enrollment. What do you think, Alex?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think, everybody in the chat is kind of aligning here. It's about clear communication, the right application of language, but also that LLM, that underlying sort of critical acknowledgement and review of the learner that we're talking to and communicating to as well. So really aligning to the requirements of our target market and of every individual learner within the process. So yeah, couldn't agree more. What does a successful enrollment process look like for the learner? And I think here it's a question I might pose to you actually, Miles. Successful enrollment. Obviously, we've got to look at that unique individual learner as well. So what does that look like from your experience?
Well, from my experience to seeing how RTOs operate, VET is really good at building hoops for the learner to keep jumping through before they even get to the part they were originally interested in. So there's a first hoop, and then there's a second hoop, a third hoop, and it's the endless number of kind of qualifying stages that frustrates a learner. So a clear enrollment process makes it very essential focused. What does the learner need to actually do to get to the course? And LLM is coming up 105 times. When do we pose that? How do we do that? The new standards have brought in some interesting kind of concepts around suitability, internal suitability testing. What does that look like? What is an internal suitability test? What is that on top of the existing testing? How many things do we need to do before the learner runs away? Which is the frightening part of the end of this, because learners spook easily. So we don't want to make the process of getting into a course more than it has to be. We also don't want to avoid covering things that need to be there. So it's that balance between the essential and going too far and driving the learner away. So the enrollment process is such a careful balance, I reckon. What do you think?
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And I think you're aligning to a lot of the thoughts and feelings that are being shared out there. And it really does have an undertone here of that clarity. It's kind of pulling on that integrity piece. We need to be really clear, open, and transparent to our learner exactly what is expected, what's coming, and how we're going to support them through every step. So yeah, it's very, very clear that we're all in the same sort of space. So it is obviously important, really important for a student to have a smooth, seamless experience that promotes engagement, understanding, and also builds confidence from the offset. Now, how do we do that? Clear instructions on how to access online assessment tools or platforms that you're using, how to navigate the interface, how to complete processes, and where do we find help? So clear instruction is absolutely one of the key items that we're looking for. Accessibility. Make sure it's important to ensure that your learners have the tools that they need. Can they access your online platforms? Do they understand where to go, and how do they get that support? So technical support. It's important to provide learners technical support as part of their onboarding, part of their orientation and induction to the course. If you're using tools, those tools might not be familiar with your learner. How are we going to support them? How are we going to bring up that capability to, first off, engage with us through the tools that we're using? Practice activities and processes as well, and gathering feedback from the learner very early on to ensure that you've got an open form of communication between your organization and that end consumer. So making sure that they're heard, and wherever possible, you're delivering that flexibility to support your learner through a defined process that you've got. With conducting enrollment, I think this is really key as well. I've worked with a lot of organizations that are keen for efficiency, to reduce cost, to also, building a really robust compliant process. But that does not mean we need to change how we attack that. Even with fantastic tech, tools that are really fit for purpose, if we've got maybe a school-based learner, maybe we've got a learner with LLM support requirements, do we push them all to do an online enrollment? Maybe that enrollment process is something we coach. Maybe we still deliver that face-to-face, but using tech to gather that information, our teams can gather that information on a phone call, on a Zoom meeting, face-to-face. We don't necessarily need to completely change our process to unlock the potential or some of those benefits of applying tech still in that space. I think it's really, really important as well, to maintain that we may have a defined process, but that process should always look at flexibility as well. Cool. Okay. Support and progression. So communicating with your learners. Again, drop into the chat here. What methods do we use to communicate with our learners? Are we using different sort of points of contact? Miles, what mechanisms for supporting learners with perhaps some diverse needs do you see working well? How are we, minimizing points of contact perhaps sometimes?
Well, when I think about this, I think about how many channels there really are. If you start listing them, you got text messages, phone calls, emails, WhatsApp, which is another messaging platform next to that as well. And when you start adding them all up, how many ways do we actually contact students? I once had a trainer and assessor ask me if it was okay to DM them through Instagram. And I was like, no, you just minimize the number of channels. And that way the learners aren't looking for 5, 6 different places to go just to speak to someone. And also they don't have to learn 5, 6 different ways to speak to someone. So minimizing the number of channels and centralizing it was the most effective strategy. And as more and more places move to online platforms, the option of just moving everything to there is actually easier. The learner has everything in one place. And it requires less of a step in digital literacy to learn this new communication channel and how to operate properly in it. So with communicating with learners, go to the place that they go often. If they're logging in every day looking at their assessments, then the communication should be there as well. And that philosophy has always worked really well with the courses that we did this with.
Yeah, there's a question posed in chat of what do we use? How would we suggest that the best practices here? Sharon actually in chat said, depends on the learner. And I couldn't agree more. I think this is about great communication. We do want to minimize all those options, Facebook groups, instant messengers, SMSs, phone calls, taking it from one system to another. It can get really confusing. And straight away, that moves away from our principles of what we're trying to achieve to support a learner complete. So I do think, really keeping it simple, all brought together. In solutions, with LMSs, we'll have great chat features, great capability to track student engagement, student interactions, send communication of lots of different methods and mediums as well. Somebody's managed to unmute themselves, so if they just drop back on mute, that'd be cool. And I do think we have to really, again, look at what is appropriate and what delivers on the flexible requirements of those learners. So again, comes back, if we do our job well in the enrollment phase, if we're clear communication and we've got a process laid out and we're gathering feedback from that learner, we can really address those unique requirements with the tools that we're using. So again, documented process, but our process is flexible to support. I think it's super, super important. There is no replacement in some in some delivery methods, in some interactions, than face-to-face. And that face-to-face in the modern world might be via Zoom, might be an online meet or the like, but that face-to-face contact, that human interaction, we're looking at great tech, AI and everything else, instant messengers, bots and everything else, but face-to-face, we're talking about a human interaction that's got empathy, can critically think, can react to those requirements of a learner. It should not be overlooked, even in the modern tech world. A big advocate of tech freeing up time to allow us to be able to facilitate that sort of thing. Awesome. Okay, so this is a really interesting one as well. Be there for your learner. This support and progression piece is about providing ongoing assistance and guidance all the way through, both navigating your systems, your processes, your platforms, and addressing challenges that might arise as they arise. So again, great technical support, clarifying those requirements. So educators can support learners by clarifying assessment requirements, including the assessment formats, the types, the questions, the time limits. How can we help learners to understand what's expected of them? And that needs to be temperature checked through the support and progression piece. Make them feel as confident as they can as they go and complete that assessment. We need to have them in that really effective, really motivated and empowered sort of state wherever possible. And that's where great support and helps with this progression piece. This is definitely one of the key sort of phases of this learner journey that will churn and will lose and will definitely have a massive impact on that student completing. So going back to the top 3 reasons why we're getting less than 50% completions in vet, that third reason is did not meet my expectations. Now, the course outcomes, even the course content may well do, but our interactions, our engagement and support with the learner could be a big challenge in that. And feedback on performance in real time, timely feedback that can motivate learners to continue learning. It's an absolute skill that not only our delivery teams, our trainers and assessors, will refine, and most trainers and assessors are fantastic at this, but they might be time poor, they might be stretched. So that's where we've got to lean on the tech to drive efficiencies in other areas of their operation. And offering additional resources, having those resources we can pull in, study materials, different types of learning and addressing different learning styles, so important. The concerns that are raised throughout this, very often when you look at an appeal or a complaint, it probably started, the foundations of that concern were probably long ago before that concern was raised. And it starts from how we're interacting, supporting and engaging our learners. So really clear channels to address concerns. It might be something as simple as technical issues, availability of tech. It might even be that we haven't picked up on that learner's requirements, haven't done a great job through our enrollment piece and tailored what's necessary. Now, we're going to hear from one of our clients, Jordan Murphy. He's the CEO of OnFit, and he's got some great insights into what results and benefits they've seen from applying great tools in space.
Yes, from a student side, it's a lot to do with communication. So for us before, it was very much done through email, through phone call. And while we still have those mechanisms of contact, it's a lot more engaged from the student side because they can also get in touch with the team via chat. They know who's assessing their work. It is it feels a more intimate, more guided experience versus what we were doing before, which was very much get a student in the system, they study, whoever assesses. They didn't have a single point of contact, a mentor, which that's something that Cloud Assess has afforded them.
Awesome. So Jordan, there touching on sort of that real sort of face-to-face time, that really sort of honest and genuine, high integrity sort of support and contact. Awesome.
Yes, from a student by students.
We're just moving on there. So there's one more piece here. So how can you be proactive? Again, Jordan's got some insights he's going to share with us here. So proactive, how are we
assessment resubmissions and that sort of thing, which just coming from my experience in Moodle versus to what we can do now, we can really drill down to that. I would say easier in Cloud Assess. We can get granular. We can see where students are struggling, where they need more help, and we can intervene and, you know, get in there before they start coming to us, which it's small, but ultimately that is giving them a better student experience if we can sort of get to them first, right? They're not having to pick up that phone and give us a call. We're proactively reaching out to them, which again is something that we can do now with Cloud Assess. The extensive reporting as well is something that I know that my team uses daily. Department to department, it's different on the reports they use, but you know, we've developed, again, mentor programs off the back of these reports because we can see these areas where students get stuck. And you know, yes, we need to write to a training package and make sure that they are learning what they need to learn, but to offer them that extra service and to have that level of visibility that we didn't have before has been a game changer for us. Assessment resubmissions and that sort of thing.
Awesome. Some really, really powerful insights there. And I think the overtone of being really proactive. So really getting into those requirements before perhaps the problems occur. Using great data, great information, great insights, and making it really visible to your team through the tools that you're using is an absolute game changer for making sure that we're in front of that curve. We're picking up those challenges that learners might have. And we can start building patterns. We can start building trends. We can start perhaps questioning our tools and the information that we have to really sort of, you know, alleviate some of those pain points. So we've got another poll now we're going to jump into. This is getting into the phase of the training and assessment piece. So within the learner journey, we've touched on enrollment. We've had some really good interactions, some side conversation in the chat there in regards to enrollment, support and progression, and now we're into the training and assessment. So we'll launch that poll. Again, using Slido, just the QR code. You can also go to slido.com and enter the passcode there, the 7257327. What are the characteristics of a successful assessment tool? So, meets the objectives, clear and explicit instruction. Good, we're getting a few in there now. So why training and assessment is key to outcomes. So, you know, getting training and assessment right boosts engagement, validates skills, keeps learners on track for completion. When done poorly, it's a major source of the dropout rates and compliance risks, obviously. So clear instructions, reliable, validated and moderated certainly helps us keep on track with you know, a great review and temperature check of what we're setting out to achieve here within our assessment systems. Lots of stuff coming in here. Yeah, rules of evidence. Evidence is something we're going to absolutely touch on as well. Easy to understand is the strong overtone here. Again, it's simple, isn't it? You know, making sure that we address that easy to understand piece. You know, clarity in what we're describing. So clear instructions, easy to use. And remember the flexibility piece. This could be different for everybody. You know, what's clear to one is not necessarily clear to another. So building in those requirements is very, very challenging. And again, this is where great data helps to see how effective we are with this. Awesome. We might leave that there, but yeah, very, very aligned to what we've got. If you want to elaborate, definitely drop it in chat as well. Currency is jumping up a lot. Yeah, there's nothing worse than our content not being current to the required outcomes of industry and the goals that we're trying to achieve here. Couldn't agree more. Fantastic. Yeah. Okay. Vet course, not a doctorate. That's fantastic, Richard. Yeah. It's very commonplace to see a lot slide into that more academic rather than vocational approach. When we come to assessment, we kind of commonly see that it's overthought and overcomplicated. So yeah, couldn't agree more. One of my pet peeves for sure. I'm a very practical learner, very practical person, and I must see thousands of assessment tools every month. And straight away, I tune out myself when I'm being asked to build a project around those or support the digitization of them. If I can't understand how to use it or apply it, we've certainly got some problems. Fantastic. Okay, so assessment, what and why we assess, apply the rules and principles, that personalization, so key. Supporting compliance, obviously, is part of the process, and running a really efficient process. I keep mentioning the word efficiency, and it gets back to that first word cloud that we did. And, some of the challenges that our learners were having are some of the challenges that we as training providers also have. And that's, time. Time is precious. We're all time poor when up against it. So this is where great tools, great systems should be affording your teams really efficient processes through every stage of this journey. It's not necessarily removing that face-to-face time, but it could be enabling that face-to-face time. Trainers that have stood in front of printers, collating paperwork, using systems that aren't efficient, that aren't aligned to your model, super ineffective. No trainer that I've ever come across got into the industry because they love paperwork. So efficiency, efficient processes. Miles, do you have anything to add there as well?
I'm looking at that first bullet point because that's something that we asked. I often ask my students in TAE when we reach the assess cluster. The first question I'd pose to them was, why do we assess students? And quite often there wasn't a clear answer because the purpose of the assessment was never there. So each of the course outcomes can be kind of embroiled into the assessment by aligning the purpose of the assessment. I'll use an example. So for TAE, for Cert 4, the outcome was an unsupervised vet trainer and assessor. That's what it says on training.gov. When someone finishes the qualification, they will work without supervision. So that purpose was drilled into every assessment so the student could recognize why they were doing it. Why were they completing the assessment? And too often assessments seem as if they're in a vacuum. A student will come home from work, so they've got family, they've got work, they've got food, they've got all these things they need to do, and then they sit down finally to do their assessment. And the first question just appears, list 3 things. And their mind can't see what it's talking about because there's no context behind it. There's no purpose behind the question. So it starts from a design perspective when you can instill a purpose behind the question or the task or the activity. And then from there, the student will see why they're doing the assessment. And too often, training and assessment seem quite far apart. The training was awesome. The learner had stories, the trainer had stories, the class had discussions. That was fun. The assessment seems cold, it seems isolated, and it seems incomprehensible because there's no context behind it. So we tested with this and moved that training structure over to assessments. And so what if we can make the assessment more engaging by using things like stories and references and real-world examples? And that way the student could see the purpose of the assessment and they could see everything else. That in turn led to quite a higher completion straight away because it wasn't a puzzle anymore for them. and it actually aligned with what they were hoping for in the first place, which is a course that speaks to them. And if only half the course speaks to them, the training half, but the assessment half doesn't, then the course has effectively failed. We have to assess students at the end of a training assessment cycle. We need that proof. We need that evidence. The leap is the student doing it. That's what we're all hoping for, the student completing the activity. What does it take for them to complete it? For them to understand the purpose of the assessment. So that's what that first bullet point has made me think about while you were talking, Alex. It's a really cool question, by the way. What makes a successful assessment?
And I tell you, I will say, I think you absolutely nailed. If ever we need to pull apart relevance, that's it. You know, why is it relevant to me? How are you showing me that it's relevant? You absolutely nailed it. Great context as well. I couldn't agree more. But we throw in, and we a lot of us think we understand what relevance is. How does that make me feel? How does it impact me? How does it align? How have you taken me on this journey? Love it. Great examples. Thank you very much for sharing, Miles. Okay, competency assessment versus or how do we align to a real world ready sort of piece. So competency-based assessments ensure that learners know the theory and can apply skills. So we've talked about, you know, demonstrating their acquired knowledge and skills. In real life scenarios, it's about building confidence and making sure that they're job ready graduates. So this is exactly how we define, you know, our competency. So they know it, they can do it. That's, you know, the technical challenge, I suppose, around how we align this. So real world ready is a statement that I've used many times, but how you interpret that through this learner journey is about that communication piece, about making it relevant and making sure that it's current. So they know it. Let's define what they need to know. It's given to us in the unit standards, but how do we apply that with the right contextualization to make it really powerful? So yeah, they know it, they can do it. So setting learners up for success. So strong assessment tools, it goes without say. A strong assessment tool is valid, it's aligned to the training package outcomes, it's reliable, it's flexible, authentic, and sufficient. Now, this obviously is our compliance risk, minimizes our compliance risk, ensures confident outcomes, but we've got to apply it in the right context. So, Miles, do you have more to add on this one?
This is tricky. This is where there's a comment that came up earlier. It's a vet course, not a doctorate. There it is, by Richard. Awesome quote. The need to balance the assessment itself with the outcome, but then each time you go in and start validating and say, okay, have we covered the validity? Have we covered this one performance criteria? And I think what a lot of people have seen on training.gov is performance criteria becoming more than just one sentence, but multiple pieces within the same criteria, which cascades into expansions and assessments. How do you balance that? How do you balance what's essential with what's mappable, what's compliant? My previous employer said very simply, he said, we don't build assessments for the auditor. We build assessments for learners. We're client focused. And we ensure they're compliant, but we don't write them for an audit's perspective. I found that really important whenever I was doing design. It rippled through everything after that. If I make it about the learner, not the auditor or compliance, then the assessment would be mapped correctly, and the assessment would become flexible, and the assessment would become fair. So quite often we lean towards compliance because we're frightened of it. But in fact, leaning towards the learner achieves compliance at the same time. So that's what I was thinking when you were talking about that.
Yeah, awesome. Again, I love the experience share here. And this is ensuring that your tools, your assessment system, your processes really have that flexibility piece to match the requirements that we're trying trying to deliver on here. So we spoke about evidence earlier, closes gaps in evidence. We've got to make that evidence gathering meaningful, but also very accessible. And it needs to be real world. It needs to apply to the learnings that we're gathering that evidence for. Obviously catering to different learning styles. So that formative assessment piece, not necessarily going to the summative piece, but more the formative piece. When we look at our delivery from learning all the way through, how are we addressing both our learning instruments and our assessment tools? How are we doing this? And what support do we have from our tech and from our platforms? It needs to be able to, show both to the auditor, both to the organization, but how do we support that mapping to the criteria as well? How do we ensure that we've got a clear communication piece that says why this is relevant? And yeah, the ability to gather real-time sort of feedback, assess quality and feedback on the go, and delivering in locations perhaps where accessibility is typically a challenge. So working offline in remote environments and stuff. Really getting into what our learner requires. So what is it that they need, and making sure our tools support that in our delivery. So delivery mode impacts retention for sure. So here, regardless of the modes, regardless of mode, it needs to be active for the learner. It needs to be very, very much on point. So active learning strategies lead to high retention. Where, it's an absolute sort of fact. We've got some source here that you'll be able to sort of have a look at post the event. But active learners retain so much more information. We've got them and they're engaged. Miles, I know you've done some work on this in the past as well. So I'll ask you to speak to the synchronous versus asynchronous sort of paradigm here. Get some thoughts.
Yeah, sure. This is as we look more and more into e-learning in the last few years. So VET is naturally workplace based. It is the natural environment for VET is in a workplace, whether it's a restaurant or a mining site or anything in between. VET naturally aligns with that. But the learning is moving further and further away from that. It's moving into classrooms and then online. And most places, they incorporate kind of like a blended model. So a bit of face-to-face, a bit of online, and maybe something in the workplace too. But then each course almost has its own unique need as well. So what works for hospitality doesn't work for construction. And what works for construction won't work for hairdressing. So each course has its unique balance of face-to-face time, online time, and then workplace time. And there's two concepts, Alex, synchronous and asynchronous. As we move more and more into online, we need to think about the time in between sessions. Like in a workplace, the time in between shifts, there's very little evaporation of understanding. Whereas the time between online sessions, there is quite a lot of evaporation of understanding. So asynchronous could be tasks built in between the sessions. Homework is the poor word for it, but something that they can do in the in-between that helps that retention of understanding. So the way I saw it, as the modes moved away from workplaces, the need for asynchronous activities was increased. And there was a higher need for them to do retention activities in between sessions. So balancing that was kind of the game. What do you think, Alex?
Yeah, again, it's that different methods and modes that need to be applied in context to support the different learner requirements. So engaging the learner in real time and out of real time, leading questions, just dropping in maybe to a forum, to a group post, maybe that when we start discussions, we start that sort of critical thinking process. So, hey, great example. Why don't you bring a story next time about how that applies? Why don't we, just start looking at that more student-centric sort of learning approach? Couldn't agree more. Something that's very, very sort of overlooked, where we're just delivering a linear process. The asynchronous piece, really, really key, I think, as well, where we're fighting that time pressure, we're fighting those day-to-day sort of life impacts, and trying to juggle work with our study couldn't be more important. Those sort of micro activities that jump in and mix it up piece will definitely turn learners into a much more active learner rather than just passively moving through our content. Absolutely. Great piece. Okay. Minimizing the risk with smart compliant tools. We'll quickly touch on this one. Obviously, your tools, they've got to be compliant as well. So, being able to map your content, being able to have really rigorous version control, digital audit trails, real-time sort of quality processes, validation, moderation, and QA, just so important. So compliance is supported, driven by the right tools that you pick here. Couldn't overlook that one for sure. It's a big part of picking that right platform. Boost outcomes. So personalized learning journeys with automations. So we're talking about those drop-in activities, those bite-sized activities. We're talking about that asynchronous engagement and moving learners from that passive state. You can use a lot of automations. You can use a lot of different sort of challenges, wants and needs within a personalized journey. So tools such as Cloud Assess can drive that interaction to a really personal level. We can literally tailor and customize learner journeys. To-do lists that give you progress bars, really clear visualization of what we're achieving and how we're heading towards our goals. Real-time feedback. So I might be jumping in, completing some learning, completing some training, some assessment pieces in my own time. It might be late one evening, whatever it be. How are we getting real-time quality feedback to the learners? Great tools. Third-party interaction and engagement as well. So much of our time is spent in the workplace, and we don't want to overlook the potential for getting additional evidence, the potential for taking that learning from our third-party pieces as well. So real-world experience is super important too. And being able to track this, Jordan from OnFit there, when Jordan was describing how they use reports and how they use data to be really proactive and engage early on before challenges are apparent, before challenges are raised to them, they're actually picking up through great information, engagement and stuff is absolutely key. And yeah, Sharon, another good point in the chat there. With these tools, time to mark, making sure that feedback, that marking is really timely and relevant as well. Very, very important. So keeping learners motivated and on track. So in the training and assessment piece, obviously, it's got to be accessible, convenient. It's got to be available where I need it, where I want it, where I'm able to commit my time. I might need really well-timed, friendly, clear reminders, visuals, dashboards, tracking progress, and calendaring. So I can schedule time. I can build around my requirements and given options by my trainer, given options by my provider, how I want to learn and when I want to learn, really tailors my journey. Again, that motivation piece, so digital credentialing, doesn't have to be locked into just micro credentials. Those digital badges, those virtual rewards, those things that I can share socially on LinkedIn and in groups, it's a real motivation piece. So definitely think about how you apply those in your tools. And that personalization, unique to me. I'm being acknowledged, I'm being listened to as a learner. And the support communication piece, we've touched on it a lot, but making it so accessible. And I want in-app chat perhaps. I need communication pieces, forums, group communication. And those forums, the learning can be led by my direct sort of cohorts as well, not necessarily having to put all the onus on the trainer and assessor being there or the organization having all the answers. Forums are a great way of learning and popping in there as a trainer perhaps once or twice a week and nudging those calls. Hey, share some real world experiences. Hey, come back with a story on that. Talk to us about that. It's a great way of doing that asynchronous, ongoing learning piece. So yeah, really, really important. Automations, so auto marking, very, very topical, but also always raises the concern. Auto marking, there's times and place for it, from an efficiency perspective, in the right context, used to the right degree and the right level. Real great enabler to give our trainers lots more face-to-face time and stuff. But obviously, there's a limit there to how you might want to apply that. It could be that we're getting email notifications, reminders. We've got visuals in different forms. And again, minimizing those touch points and those channels. It could be that, if we need to be reassessed, further attempts and stuff, you could drive a lot of automation around that too. Does not replace the human interaction here. It's just a great tool, a great facilitator. So the administration burden on trainers has never been greater. This is where we want to lean on our systems to really, really improve that for them. So quick Q&A, drop into the chat as well. What impacts the timeliness of a certificate issuing? So we're moving to that completion piece now. So quality checks, required fields. Talk to me. What's the impacts of sort of certificate issuing here? Miles, your thoughts on this one?
Well, from my experience, whenever we looked at this final step of the journey, it was waiting. It was waiting for certain things to happen that should have happened earlier. So quality check you mentioned, that was a really big one. Are we still checking to see if all the check boxes have been checked, which is the most ridiculous kind of step to think about, but that's how it's done almost. Somebody has to make sure that things are done to ensure that before we say yes to this, are we happy with the evidence? So quality check, verification, payment consolidation, that's a big one too. So they might get to the end of their academic journey, but then the payment hasn't followed the same speed. So waiting on that. So how do we, it's because we're working off two systems. There's payment on one side, academics here, and both are being tracked differently. Or it could be around waiting on certain workbooks. So some workbooks towards the end are often the largest. Placement is often a big one. So getting that done before the next step, or has the next step already started? So all of these, the timeliness of certificate issuing comes down to the accumulation of dozens of steps, not just one step. And that's how I've seen it in the past through RTOs.
Absolutely.
How about you, Alex?
Yeah, agree. And that lingering student, that is probably a real cost to the business where we've got to go back and rework. A lot of the stuff in the chat coming forward there is very much around our process. We haven't picked up USI correctly. We haven't validated. We haven't followed payments. So building that into our learner journey and getting those individual steps right when we get to this completion stage, really, really powerful for closing out learners and getting that completion rate even higher. Couldn't agree more. So really timely. We've definitely touched on that for sure. Awesome. So we've got a free guide here in the pack. You'll be able to download it. So this is aligning your tools to learner needs, automating touch points, delivering great experience, how to reduce risk and build better outcomes. It's a 10-step guide, really easy to consume, definitely worth downloading and jumping in there. Just as we're getting to time, and there is a Q&A after this one, just a quick overview of some of the key takeaways from today's session. So a structured learner journey definitely improves outcomes. Engagement and support to drive that retention, how technology can make a difference, and data-driven insights that help identify at-risk learners early. Really great to hear that from one of our clients, Jordan there. Great context. And simplifying processes, better student experiences. As I say, you will all be getting access to the recording and the pack. Before we sort of wrap up here, we've got a couple of minutes for Q&A, and we'll just ask you to drop in the chat. Let us get all the questions that haven't been answered. You can feel free to share, and leaves me to thank you all for jumping in and supporting us over the webinar. It was really exciting, great level of engagement and interaction. Really, really good. And thank you very much, Miles. Fantastic insights. I think it really helps to make it meaningful.
You're welcome, Alex.
Okay. There's a QR code on the screen there. Simplify student management, training and assessment, end-to-end part of this journey. Something that here at Cloud Assess, we not only support, but we do it fantastically. We'd love to have a conversation if you've got some opportunities in that space. And post the webinar in the next 48 hours, you'll receive an email which is going to include a statement of attainment, a link to the event feedback survey. Please engage with that. Keen to hear how that was sort of received, access to the recording of the webinar, the copy of the PowerPoint presentations, and the Q&A, and any additional support and resources. Thank you very much to the Velg team for having us today, and looking forward to catching you all in future webinars. Got a few questions coming in here that we'll have a look at as well. So, experience on best practice. That was to another attendee. Erin jumping in there to push them in. Definitely great to share that experience piece. Superb.
Alex, so I'm not seeing any more questions, but I am seeing a lot of thank yous for the session. But did you want to share your experience of best practice? That was from Sherez.
Yes, certainly. In what context, Erin?
I'm not too sure. It kind of just came through as you were wrapping up.
Yeah, we've had a lot in the chat, which is great. But yeah, happy to share experiences for sure. Maybe if you'd like to reach out to us, Sherez, we can definitely give you some more meat on the bones on that one.
There is a question from a sailor. Sorry if I pronounced that wrong. What is a good way to arrange work experience for students? Any good suggestions so they can get?
You want to take that one? Work experience.
Yeah, that actually came up often, saying, how can we get work experience for the students, whether they were in the course or finishing a course? So it came down to the trainer and the school really being connected with industry. It's almost how would you say, a measure of their actual industry connection. Can they meet with employees and say, we've got 4 or 5 students in a course, they're reaching this stage of their current course, have you got any spots open for them to come on board? So that almost demand of currency, if a trainer and assessor really is current, and that's a elastic word, if they are current, the more current they are, the more interaction they have with employers and industry. They could say, oh, I know someone who's currently looking for this type of person. You've reached a point of your course that you can actually start working on that. So it really does come down to the trainer being that ambassador to industry. And given that currency is demanded of us, that's almost a measure of trainer aptitude in itself.
Absolutely.
So that would be
Yeah, I think that employee engagement, that industry engagement piece has to live all the way through our teams. As training providers, it's done at multiple levels to really drive those outcomes for learners. Yeah, I agree. Sorry, Miles, I jumped in on you there.
No, it's all good. It comes up often, and sometimes we had employers who came to us because they knew that we were running the course, so they would periodically come back to us saying, have you got any shining graduates for us? And we would talk about, we've got this group here, these guys can do this group is working on this. that kind of connection there. So it came down to the industry trusting the RTO to leading good results. So it was almost like a feedback cycle in itself. If we worked with them and gave them good results, they would come back to us eventually and say, okay, who else have you got? And then that cycle will keep happening. And it was trainer led and RTO led. So yeah, that kind of just being close to industry. And industry doesn't have to be everything. It can be just what's in the area. So that would be the step to getting work placements and work experience, really.
Very good detailed response there to that question. I don't see any more popping through. Erin, I think we might be able to wrap up there.
Yes, I'm not seeing any more. So if that is everything, thank you so much, Alex and Miles, for presenting, and for everyone who attended today's session. And I hope you all have a great afternoon, but we'll hope to see you online next time.
Awesome. Thanks very much for having us, Erin.